Hey everyone, this is Jill Griffin, the host of the Career Refresh, and today I have a guest that I have wanted to interview for a while. I've been a fan of her work, and we're going to talk about the bulk of her current work today. Lucy is the regulatory expert and the founder and president of the Cost of Loneliness Project. The Cost of Loneliness Project is a mission driven organization advancing programs designed to increase awareness and the understanding of chronic loneliness and how we can create action that improves connection, mitigate public health issues, and ultimately, leaders in the workplace need to understand not only for themselves, but for their clients, the people they serve, their teams, what is the impact of chronic loneliness. And with that, I welcome Lucy Rose.
And thank you, Jill. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's just, before we jump into the juicy part around loneliness and the really working for the FDA, you've also worked for the top consulting organizations. You started, looks like way back in doing sales rep and pharma. You're also a physician's assistant. Tell us how you got through that and where you are today, because I always find that so interesting and people understanding that career paths are not always linear and that they take lots of different shapes and sizes and create what we are today.
You got that right. Mine has certainly not been linear, that's for sure. I'll do it real fast, but first I just have to give notice to the fact you said we're all leaders. I could not agree more. And for everybody listening, as we talk about loneliness and about career paths and that kind of stuff, we all are, and we all have opportunities every day to demonstrate that. So thank you.
Yeah.
I started as a sales rep. I have an MBA. I'm a PA as well, all kinds of weird things in terms of titles. But bottom line is, I have been involved in healthcare my whole career, be it as a sales rep or a sales manager. I was able to run the group at FDA that regulates all the advertising promotion of prescription drugs in the US. I went out and started, and I worked at Bristol Myers Squibb as well before, and was at Deloitte, all kinds of things in between. I started my own business. I'm a regulatory expert for pharma, as you said, and had the privilege of working for about 400 clients over that time.
Wow.
During the time I did that, though, I traveled all the time, Jill, all the time. And as I traveled, and I mean really all the time, like, I don't know, 8 million United miles, and, a lot of stuff. As you think about travel, though, for me, 6 days a week for over 20 years, it takes its toll.
Yes.
Sitting in a hotel room every night, all the time, I gained 40 pounds. I realized I was not making the friends that I need as a person who's one of connection, and it was taking its toll on me. And I began to think again about public health and the 40,000 foot level. If it was impacting me that way, all that travel and the downtime, I wondered how it might be impacting others. So I started doing research about 9 years ago, I guess now, to the impact of loneliness and realizing the power of the mind-body connection and what that means. And I decided at that point that in addition to the work that I was able to do as a regulatory expert for public health, I really wanted to delve into this and see if I couldn't uncover a lot of this, make it more obvious to everybody about the connections and make an impact in our world at every level, from the individual to community to society, in terms of understanding the importance of this and how we must deal with it. I really believe it is the largest epidemic right now that we have.
We have, yeah.
Frankly, it's one we actually can prevent.
Do something about. So let's get a little bit clear for people listening what we're talking about, right? Most people are going to associate loneliness with social isolation, but you've defined it as something deeper. Do you want to give us, so we have some of the vocabulary that we're all working off of around loneliness?
Love to do that. And social isolationism, to say that real fast 5 times quickly. Social isolationism and loneliness certainly can go hand in hand. They certainly do. And most recent research has shown that social isolationism also is highly impactful in a negative way on people, in addition to loneliness. But as I am defining loneliness today, I'm talking about chronic loneliness, that loneliness that you feel when you're missing something in terms of your connections that you need more of. And physical impacts that makes on you. And I think the easiest way to think about this is think about fright and flight. When you see something you're afraid of, your body, as you know, heart starts beating faster and you start sweating and your breathing's faster in order to handle something that you know is dangerous to you. It's a cortisol release primarily, but other epinephrine is also released in your body. that cortisol release is great if you're in real danger
Yeah.
because you can run faster
Right.
and get away. When it is present all the time, though, when that chronic stress from chronic loneliness is there all the time, bathing your cells in that, it also causes inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And inflammation and all of those things coming together over time can cause physical changes in your
Change
body,
the body. Yeah.
up to and including a 26% increase in mortality,
Oh,
increase
wow.
in stroke and cardiovascular disease, major increase in cardiovascular disease, about a 32% increase in stroke and a 27% increase in cardiovascular disease.
So
50,
real outcomes. So Lucy, I want to make that clear for listeners to really understand and breaking that down. And for any of my longtime listeners, you know that I talk about stress and I talk about fight or flight and what actually happens. We have an expert here, but we've talked about how when you're under stress, right, there's the stressor, the external thing that's happening, and the stress. Your body is going to deal with the stressor. Up, there's a presentation coming up, there's a delayed flight, there's an argument with a friend or family member. That stress, you're going to deal with that. Your mind and your brain is going to know how to communicate. But I want Lucy to take us through what happens actually to the body and the secondary system shutting down. Because I think when we really understand that, we start to think twice about how important is this and how do I want to approach and be intentional moving forward?
Yeah. And I think you're really onto something. And all of us have felt it. You actually named three things there, like we got a big speech coming up. And for your audience, that happens to them all the time. And it is something that most people are actually afraid of. And so
Right.
when you do, think about your body and how it feels in that moment. Your heart beats faster. You can feel it sometimes in your chest. You're breathing quicker. You sometimes get sweaty palms. Your knees get weak. All of that is a natural reaction to stress. It's a good thing most of the time because it's giving our body a warning. Oh my gosh, something's wrong. And we're going to help you take care of it, or I'm going to help you take care of it because that's what our brain does. That's a great thing until it lasts in a chronic way. And as you last in a chronic way through that, and you have more cortisol, and more of the physical reactions to this stress over a long time, i.e., chronic loneliness, which can happen again when you're not getting, if you don't have a single best friend,
Right.
no one that you share with, no one that you feel really safe around. Sometimes it has to do with purpose. There are a lot of things there that can cause you to feel like you don't have what you need. When that happens chronically, okay, then all of those things come together, and we do a couple of things. Sometimes we try to soothe that behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and it can lead to things like
Yep.
alcoholism, other kinds of addiction. Okay, sometimes that soothing is overeating, and it can lead to obesity, which takes us to some of our issues with type 2 diabetes
Mm-hmm.
epidemic right now,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, and other issues with overweight.
Right.
Um, but the fact is, it also causes inflammation. And when we look at that inflammation, some of the data is telling us now that it might increase the chances of dementia up to 50%. Now, again,
Nice.
all of these numbers that I'm sharing today, if you read different sources, if you read Cigna, if you read Harvard Business Review, any of these, they're going to Gallup polls. They're
Give you
going
a
to,
variation on the data.
if
Yeah.
you will. But it's that mind body connection over time that is
Right.
scary for all of us. Again, when you look at cardiovascular disease being increased by 29%, stroke by 32%, more cancer due to this. And we can relate that to dollars at work because loss of productivity, I actually wrote it down so I wouldn't get it wrong.
Mm.
The loss of productivity in extra medicine spending, let's go there for Medicare, $6.7 billion a year. The
Yeah.
loss of productivity in workplace is monstrous for
Right.
absenteeism, for healthcare costs, all those things.
Right.
So a lot happens.
What
In
I'm
fact,
hearing you say as takeaways for our listeners is one, as an individual, you should care because while the stress at sometimes will help you perform, it's also going to suppress all your secondary systems. What do we mean by that? Your digestive system, your reproductive system, right? You have a stomach ache, right? That's what we're talking about. Those other systems tend to start to slow down because we're always in the stress, which our body is saying perform, 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 or fight, right? That's the fight or flight. So thinking about your sleep disrupted, all of that. So now when you're not in that stressor experience and you're out of it, well,
yeah,
if we don't restart our systems, and that's what you're talking about in the mind body connection. Our bodies can handle the stress as long as we're balancing the mind body part of it. So when we layer on that and understanding loneliness, I mean, you and I were talking just before, the US Surgeon General Murthy, right, that quote that she gave around chronic loneliness being as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I mean, that's staggering. I know you've seen this in your work firsthand. If we bring it back into the workplace, should leaders be solving for this loneliness issue? Or is
Yeah.
it something that's in the private of your?
You've just opened like 1,000 doors.
I know I'm asking you a lot of questions, but
I'm
my
thrilled to death.
brain's always making connections.
Thank you, dear. You're on, and connection's the right word. First, I want to make sure that I give that quote to the right place. The person who did the work on the 15 cigarettes a day was Julianne Holt-Lunsford, who is
Okay.
one of the leading researchers in loneliness and connections out of Salt Lake City, and she's an academician. Did the work, and she showed that all-cause mortality is increased by up to 26%, guys, no joke, from loneliness. Folks who are chronically lonely. And Dr. Murdy was, in his a lot of work and all of his kind of presentations and work, he quotes that a lot, that source. So you see it a lot, but it was Julianne who actually did the research to discover that.
Okay.
Now, to answer your question, should we be concerned as business leaders or whatever world you're in, nonprofit, whatever that may be? Yes, we should, because let me give you some things that actually happen when people are chronically lonely in the workplace. Okay. Things like absenteeism increases, the quality of the work that they produce decrease, their ability to collaborate as teammates decreases, their creativity is somewhat stifled because they lose their energy and excitement around things. Your health costs go up.
Yes.
We're doing that in terms of the costs that we do, and we have to backfill. We end up losing more people because, when they're lonely and when they're uncomfortable and they're not performing as well as they might want to, or they don't feel seen, which is what a lot of this is. A lot of people, if you don't feel seen or don't feel included or a part of, then that drives loneliness.
Right.
So it is our responsibility, I think, from both a caring human empath type standpoint, but also from a purely business dollar standpoint, truth be told, that as leaders, we pay attention to this and that we create a culture, in essence, of attention to this, a culture of connection, a culture of belonging, and as part of what we do as leaders, individually and as corporate.
So people who are listening to this are probably saying, like, this sounds like a great idea. I love this idea. But Jill, do you know what's on my plate right now? Lucy, how am I going to do this? I have to, I have the presentation, I have numbers to deliver, I have all these, like, how can I possibly take this on too?
Okay. It's a lot easier than you think.
Okay.
Okay. And the numbers to deliver depend on this to a great extent. And I think that is a really important thing. This is not an either or, it's a and.
Okay.
And us to be able to be as effective in our results as we want to be, then we have to pay attention to each person and their contributions as well as the collective and how we work as teams. So as we do that, what can we do? First thing, I think, as leader managers, I think we can normalize a conversation around what it means to be connected and what it means to be a part of a team. So we can talk about also well-being and what that means, not just physically, have you gone to the gym this week, but asking open-ended questions like, how are you feeling as part of the team? Do you feel like things are going well? Is there anything we can do there? I think we can pay more attention with intentionality about celebrating contributions, about paying attention to the quiet person at the meeting. Why are they being quiet? None of this takes any time or money. It's just paying attention in a meeting, right? Yeah. Why is that person not contributing?
I love that you say that, because I feel like going back to everybody is a leader. Yeah. There's maybe the person at the top of the hierarchy, but as humans, if you're on that Zoom call or you're in that meeting and there's either someone who either isn't participating, getting curious as to why, or does every time they try to talk, someone accidentally steps on them and steps over them and they're being interrupted. And I think one of the easiest things you can do as a compassionate leader is to be like, oh, wait, hey, wait, Lucy, did you want to say something here? And like, offering the person a stage and helping them get in there. The more that happens, the more I believe they're going to be able to find the way to work within some of the nuances of
I
a
couldn't
complex
be
workplace.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much value here in doing that because clearly our real goal is to prevent loneliness in the workplace if we can. You know,
Hmm.
what can we do in the virtual world in which we live today, where so many fewer people are
Yeah.
actually there?
Hmm.
What can we also do online, to try to do that and to either to identify folks who might be at risk or to provide opportunities for them online? Might we have virtual coffee hours, as an example, where folks come in and out of a Zoom call, meeting one another? Might we encourage gently, but encourage more folks to turn their cameras on so they can see each other and somehow connect when they're doing this? Because it's
Yeah.
so easy not to do that,
Yeah. It's a big one that I'm still surprised, when I work with small business and large corporations, I'm still surprised when I get on a meeting that the it's I mean, I don't have numbers, but I'm going to say somewhere between 10 and 25% will still have their cameras off. And I get it, right? There's reasons for that, and we support you if that's what's going to best serve you. But you build connection when you're able to see people in addition to speaking. So we can still work with it if there's a reason why you can't have your camera on. But that opening that up, I think is, in back-to-back Zoom meetings and Slack check-ins, like how leaders can find opportunities for building that connection without killing productivity. I love that you're saying offering like virtual coffee hours. Are there other things that you're suggesting that they do?
Yeah, I think, we often, I'm going to say we, I think it is not uncommon for folks to kind of brush off that critical one-on-one conversation that we have with our folks. We're busy, we just don't have time this week. That's what goes away. It is critically important to take the time to build those relationships, both from productivity, okay, as well as from helping your employee, whomever that is, your colleague, feel comfortable and feel like they're part of a team. And that is where you build the trust that we need for folks to also be able to share. I don't think I'm doing too well on this team. What
Mm,
might we do? Or to have
okay.
that opportunity to ask that deeper question. I'm constantly asked, well, how do we recognize loneliness in our employees? What do we look for anyway?
Yeah.
What are those kinds of things? Well, it's important to look for that person who is not sharing, who may have used to be sharing and now they've kind of withdrawn. They have reduced participation in things. They might have changes in the quality of their work. You might notice they're somewhat anxious now. They're moving their hands in ways they didn't before. They're less expressive than they used to be. Delayed. You asked for something on Friday and they don't give it to you till Tuesday.
Okay.
Know what I mean? So
Yep.
things that are their engagement is less. They're not turning on their video when they used to. Why not? As we begin to notice things, or as somebody is different than the norm in any way, that's the person we want to ask even more questions of. We
Right.
want to make sure
Right.
that they feel comfortable and pay attention to them.
So,
So
Lucy, I love again that you just gave 7 signs. I counted as you were speaking, 7 signs of what a manager can do to spot some of that chronic loneliness in their team. So, my follow-up question to that is how do you suggest they walk the line between empathy but not overstepping?
yeah, and I think that's a really tough question to ask. And I think, you know, so much of this is building that trust and is also the leader saying, I'm going to be vulnerable.
Mm,
I'm going to share personal stories. I'm going to say, as I would tell you, Jill, we already did when we first started talking, that we are willing to be vulnerable and tell our stories, that we're willing to share real stories of connection and model the behavior we're talking about, which also helps to build trust.
yep.
But yeah, you don't want to go too far. You want to be thoughtful. Just as an example, when I said I would love to have everybody turn their cameras on, there really are some people for whom that truly is not comfortable. I'm not going to push that person.
Of course. Of
I'm
course.
going to try to figure out where they are by building trust with them so that they feel comfortable enough telling me where their boundaries are. So
Hmm.
I think, it is a fine line to some degree, but if we truly are successful in creating a culture of connection and care about each other and safety and comfort, then I think a lot of this will end up working its way out. That does not mean to me, I mean, as an example, I am a hugger. I mean, like really, if we were together,
I would take a hug for you. I'm all down with that.
but I would have asked you first.
Sure, if it was
Because
okay.
I think that is that important. And there are boundaries that we need to think about as we do this. Not everybody is a hugger,
Sure,
really.
absolutely.
And they
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable if I were to do that to them, in spite of me smiling and acting like I really care about you, because I do. But I think we have to be sensitive to those boundaries. We have to pay attention. And yet we cannot be afraid to establish a culture of connection that is really important to do for
Okay.
everybody's sake, for success
So,
of the business as well. Yeah.
so one of the things that's coming up to you as you're saying culture of connection, and I don't know if you know Scott Galloway. He's a host of the co-host of the Pivot podcast. He also is an NYU professor, and he's written a couple of books. And one of the books that he's working on now, I believe it comes out this fall, is about sort of, and I'm not on the inside track. I'm just telling you what I read in the public, the public discourse
Yeah.
is that he's writing a book on men and men and loneliness. And then we know that men are experiencing chronic rising levels of
Yeah.
loneliness, particularly amongst younger and middle-aged. Um, there was a stat that I read as I was preparing to meet with you that 1 in 3 men, or close to 30%, report having no close friend,
That's right.
which is a 5x increase just in the last 20 years. Um, and then Professor Galloway also talks about that there's like a friendship recession, which means like there's declining male community engagement. We know this as a result of COVID. There's like less third spaces, right? So if we're not going to the office, we're not going to the mosque, the church, the synagogue, the Lions Club, the VFW halls, like if we're not meeting in those other spaces, the gym, then do you have any thoughts? And I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but do you have any thoughts of ways that we can support men in ways that feel aligned to what their needs might be as they're experiencing loneliness?
I'm going to put that on hold just 1 second,
Okay.
if that's
Okay.
okay with you.
Absolutely.
I think what you've touched on is just so critically important that, we have certain things in our brains that we've kind of set that are assumptions that may or may not be correct. And as we think about loneliness, one of them, and I really promise I'll get back to your question, but one of them gets to, and I have three kind of misunderstandings, I think. We
Good.
think of ages, and this is really important. And what you often vision in lonely is that little old lady, I hate to say, because that's me, sitting in a windowsill, being silhouetted, seeming lonely. And oh my God,
Yes.
guess what? They're not. Most of them aren't. The number one area demographic for loneliness, people between the ages of 18 and 34. And I think that is critical for your audience, because so many of us, especially as we're growing, in our responsibility levels and
Mhm.
things in the workplace, are that age or are leaning folks that age. So we have to pay very close attention to them.
Yes.
Another one is the that power of the mind body connection. And the last one is we can be lonely even in a group. A lot of
Yes.
people are together and we're having a grand time. You're sitting there at Thanksgiving with your family going, this should be the best, most
And
exciting
it's
time of
not.
my life. And you're lonely as you can be because you feel different
Or
or
othered.
othered or whatever it may be. And, New York City, lonely place, lots of people. So as we think about men, is where I'm going with this. There was a reason for that. As we think about men, I think often people think, and this country was founded on, we are rugged individuals.
Yes.
Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You don't need anybody else. Yeah, we do.
Yes.
We desperately do. And women have traditionally, as we have thought about the role of women way historically, have been more social, have been in groups while men went out to hunt by themselves. Go way back there. So they do need this as well. There is no gender, men don't need it and women do.
Right. Right. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to make. Like women may talk about it more, men, it may be more invisible or more stigmatized in men. But I just want us, I'm curious, and I know we don't have the research, but I'm curious when you mentioned that age of 18 to 34, the role that social media plays. I know just for myself, if I look at social media before noon,
Yeah.
I don't feel great. either because of something it's telling me about what's going on in the world,
Yeah.
or there's something that's like setting off a compare and despair. And I don't want to start my morning or my day with the whole world in my head. I want to start my day. I choose prayer and meditation. I choose a practice. I want to start my day fortifying myself, taking my version of medicine and my vitamins before I then go out into the world. And I just wonder the role, if you have any thoughts on the role that social media might be playing here.
Certainly it is. There's no question about that. As is, again, the workplace, not coming back into the workplace, as is what you mentioned earlier about us not being a part of clubs as much as we were,
Mhm.
or churches as much as we were, or any of those things. Anytime we take away a social connection or place for that, and that has happened, especially with men, I think you're absolutely correct. That's really hard. Or anytime we give a substitute. The thing about social media is it can be wonderful.
Mm,
We're doing it right now, aren't we? We're using the power of
sure.
it to try to get this message out. You see it in families all the time where folks are connecting in meaningful ways that otherwise could not, and it means something. Where we find, though, that it does cause issues clearly is when people are doing that as a substitute for real life connections, because it can't possibly solve the same issue as a good hug from somebody that you care about
Right,
usually provides. It's
right.
also very difficult to build those initial relationships that way. It's a help to maintain one that you've already built. It's difficult to build something that's meaningful and authentic this way. Yeah, it has had an impact on all the false friends and also all of the FOMA,
Yep.
fear of being left out and all that stuff is very real because so much of this loneliness comes from, again, feeling like you don't belong or
Mhm.
aren't seen or heard.
Right.
You know? And that it just in droves drives that through
Yeah.
social media, as we know.
Yeah. And I was just talking with a group of professional women who they were a mixture of married or coupled up, but not maybe not necessarily having children or having children yet. And I
Yes.
think also remembering that whether it's by choice or by medical reasons, there's a whole group of people that want to be included, and maybe they can't share the same story, but there's another way of bringing them into the conversation. I think it's really important that we do have employee resource groups for moms, but I also think it's important to make sure that we don't and that was basically the takeaway. It was about 50 women in this group that were talking about and saying like that they don't feel that there's a place for them in the workplace because they're not a man and they're not a mom. They're a contributor and creating value. And I thought that was a really interesting take on other ways that we other people or people can feel lonely.
There's so many ways to do that. And that's why, to me, I'm big in culture and
Mm,
create culture in the workplace. And to me, when the whole culture is about, in fact, I was just reading something today, and I'll just share with you that a company could kind of use to be thoughtful about this. At company name, we believe connection isn't a nice to have, it's an essential. When we feel seen, valued, and included, we do our best work. Let's keep building a culture where everyone belongs. That's not stovepiping
yeah.
individuals and saying you're different, you're other, therefore you're important. It's we're all important. And that, and it's walking again that fine line. How do we see everyone? How do we also identify and prevent these issues? Because some people are setups. Once you're a new mom, we know you might have issues if you just relocated. Okay.
Right.
How do we
Right.
deal with that? If
Right.
someone who's just graduated from college and has left their whole support system behind, we can identify them as potentially at risk. A
Yes.
person who's just gotten a divorce,
Yes.
how do we support them? We have great support systems in place for grieving and for support when we lose someone, when someone dies. We don't have good support systems in place when we lose people in other ways.
Mm.
We lose our friends when we move.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we leave college, when we have a child and suddenly we can't go out anymore with our friends in the evening because we're busy.
We have
And
other priorities, right? Okay, so we've talked about
yeah,
the numbers and the impact financially and productivity. So that's for the leaders and the business owners and the people who are the money honeys, right? We've talked about it that way. We've also then talked about your various signs. Again, I counted 7 that you gave the examples on what leaders at all levels can do to spot the loneliness. We talked about how finding ways to be inclusive. I would love, just as we start to wrap, like what anybody who's listening today, what they can do, especially if they don't control the purse, if they don't control the bank or the money impact of things, what can they do today? They spot somebody on their team that they're like, that kind of fits that description, or, they've been a little quiet lately. What would you say someone does right today to create a culture of inclusion?
Okay, you asked several questions there. One was about an individual, one was about creating a culture. There are, if there is an individual that you see that you wonder, approaching them is the right thing. We have to destigmatize this. And one way to do it, of course, is to create that culture. So everybody's a part of connection is valued and is critical in this culture. And we understand that. Once you've done that, then the actual discussions come naturally, because I, as your leader, I'm going to already be talking about that and I'm going to see it. And I'm going to say to a person that I identify some of these signs in, how are things going for you? How do you feel as a team? How's work going? Is there anything you need? We can also do surveys, of course, where we actually are looking at workplace culture and we're trying to find out, how do you feel valued? Do you feel seen? How do you feel as a team member? What does that look like for you? So there are ways as a leader manager I can talk to someone. I can call them. I can stop by their desk. I can see them. We can, of course, reward connections that we see so that everybody sees that's part of a culture. But I can stop by the desk and say, you know what? You've been a little bit quiet recently. Is everything okay? Is there anything we can do to be more supportive?
Right.
But it's identifying it, recognizing it, showing you care. There are clearly tons of ways to do.
Right. I love the part that you touched on, because it's something I deploy, when I work with companies and small businesses regularly, is we'll call it an employee engagement survey, but it's like 3 questions and just touching base and then asking it regularly. This is not a once a year and then come away. Maybe it's monthly. Maybe, if you're asking 2 quick radio button, yes, no, scale of 1 to 10 kind of questions, it takes 2 or 3 minutes for somebody to answer that, but it also will help you get a pulse on what's going on. I always say there's culture and there's climate. If your culture is strong,
Yes.
you can withstand a climate change, which might be a shift in business, one new business, lost new business, new hires, mergers, acquisitions. You can withstand. If your culture is strong, you can withstand the climate that you're in. How
Yes.
can people
Builds
work?
resilience, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Connection builds resilience because it builds confidence. It builds trust. And connection is about trust anyway, isn't it? And as you're building that trust, you can identify and deal with change in so much of a better way. So yeah, I'm sorry, you were asking.
No, I was going to ask you, I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes, how they can read about you personally and the Cost of the Loneliness Project. But how do people work with you?
How do people work with me? They can find me on my website, The Cost of Loneliness.
Okay.
That'll be the best way. And again, I would love to speak anywhere, anytime on this topic for anybody who's interested, and work with folks in their organizations, wherever it may be. Reach out, and I would be delighted to talk with you about any of these things.
Okay. I will make sure that all of your information is in the show notes. And if you have questions, I'm looking at Lucy and knowing that I know she will come back. She will answer those questions.
I definitely will do everything I can to do that. I will for sure be back. I really do believe that this whole concept is about prevention. It's identifying possibilities, it's creating culture, because connection, we could say connection is medicine, and I think it is, but prevention is an even better medicine, isn't it? Because you really don't need it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a beautiful place to end. So if you have questions or feedback, email us at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. And as always, be intentional and please be kind to each other. All right. Thank you, Lucy, for being here, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm Jill Griffin, your host of the Career Refresh Podcast. My mission is to make workplaces more successful for everyone. So if you have ideas for topics or future guests, please email us at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. Until next time, embrace possibility, be generous, intentional, and kind.